Okay. Energy and enthusiasm to start the day. Just what we need. Okay, I think that can open. Okay. So I have a challenge ahead of me. I have to figure out notifications. Let's get that. This is actually system. Okay. System interactions. We'll go with that. So I need to start simple here. I need to build a foundation and gain insights and understanding as I grow. There's no benefit in trying to build the world immediately. By build the world, I mean dream up the most complicated system I possibly can and engineer for that most complicated system. If I try that, I'm going to fall short, or I'm going to spend weeks in analysis, design, prototyping, figure out you know, how I want things. And then when it goes to actually implementing it, I'm going to end up with a system that doesn't even look like that in all likelihood. Not necessarily, but all likelihood. Because I'm going to have missed something. I'm going to have overlooked something like the changes by the user. That was an oversight on my part. I'm like, I'd thought about it earlier and deferred the decision. So I think the simplest possible thing is to say, alert me to changes on this planning item. That's the simplest possible thing, right? Because it's basically, did this change? Yeah, here's what changed. Maybe in the interim, it's a good idea to figure out where the changes, like right now, changes are a produced stream, right? They are, it says companies, they are, here's what changed. So let's figure out. Mr. Jones, good day. How are you? How are things? Is that. Right, there's that. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm I'm trying to avoid tinkering with this too much. I'm trying to think through what I need to do. Um, I was reminded yesterday, like I was talking about passion projects, and I was reminded just how much I have grown throughout this project alone, and just how engaged I am with it in a way that I haven't been with a personal project in a long time. So I'm in a reflective mood today. Just YOLO it. Hello, dog. Um, hello, hello, one. Okay, so what I was saying is there's no point in trying to solve the world first, and there's no point trying to engineer for that solution. I have to start simple. I have to start in a clean way and try and build upon. Yeah, that's why I get. I mean, yeah, branches would be good, but I think I need to kind of. Wait, wait, dog, no, take out. She's taking the garbage out. Um, yeah, the food must have dried up. The dogs have come to see me. Um, yeah, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a notification system. The notification system is going to have its own API. So I'm trying to think about how to represent that necessarily so I can kind of draw it out properly. Because again, as I've gone through this project, I've learned that I am a very like pictures help me like see the actual picture, right? I can actually visualize more when I have something in front of me. Um, Words are hard. So if this has an API on it and the client is able to say, I care about this item, so this notification system owns the here's what I want to watch and here's how I want to be notified. The communication system is the one responsible for doing the notifications. So the communication system, everything will channel through in terms of, okay, you need to send an email, you need to send a text, or you need to send text eventually. That would be pretty cool. And pretty effective. But you need to push an inbox. So there'd be an inbox in here that the client would connect to. Push notifications would get put into the inbox and then flagged to the user, so they'd be pushed. So there'd still be an inbox message. All inbox messages are all notifications are inbox messages, but not all notifications are inbox messages. I think would be the right way to put that. So on the original diagram, notifications and communications kind of live in both worlds because they have um, a view aspect, right, and a API aspect. And I'm finding it ever harder to understand how to diagram this properly. But basically, communications and notifications kind of span across. Changes does live entirely in here if we're doing changes right. But then, yeah, it doesn't have a view. And then, so here, go there, there, go. Kind of want to say, because then what we have is communications, right? But communications has bots up there. I think we need to remove the future. I think we need to discard the future. That's the safest way of doing this. Now, communications has actually no. Communications has a view. Communications doesn't have. Oh yeah, I'm wrong. This is why drawing a picture helps. So notifications has a right side. Right. Notifications has its own data store. Oh, no, what is it? Notifications doesn't publish integration events. Let's remove that. So notifications. Yeah, notifications has a consumer and a producer side as well. Morning, Coding Craftsman. How you doing? Because notifications also lives here. Because it also consumes. And I'm thinking it produces. Got to make the lines curvy because there's no benefit to not having curvy lines, right? But notifications doesn't publish integration events itself. It's kind of like I don't know how to necessarily draw in this way that there is a two sides to this API, to this component. Exactly. Because this will consume events like changes, etc. So changes will go back in, notifications will consume. They're not integration events, they're change events. Actually, let's make that Kafka. Right. Does this make sense? Kind of. Does this make sense? So notifications will have a right API for me to, and I'm not trying to, again, I'm not trying to solve the world here. I'm trying to solve case number one. Case number one is the simplest possible thing. Let's go to the issue boards. Case number one is, as a user, I want to be notified via inbox message that a planning item has changed. So that's the simplest case. I just want to get notified of changes, that there is changes. This is the API side. And this is where we're going to get into a little bit of a debate, because if I'm doing vertical slice, the vertical slice includes the well, if I'm understanding vertical slice, I could be misunderstanding, but realistically, to deliver this feature fully, I need to do everything from the UI to the back end. The back end is a complicated and involved piece that will take me probably the next couple of streams. If that was a work day, it would probably take me a day and a half, 2 days, which to me is a good piece of work, right? It has value. It moves the system forward. There's no visuals, so verification of it is hard other than a database query. But I feel that that is a useful thing. So I think separating them out is necessary. If you go to taking it as a slice, then the UI is involved, and then we have to do the UI up. I'm still trying to figure out what is actually meant by vertical slice architecture, because so far, all I can see from the video I'm watching, which I'm only 50% through, so I will need to rewatch it again, involves dumping everything in the same API class, in the same project, and doing all the things. Yeah. Okay, so notifications. Yeah. When a chain provide an API to which that allows me to subscribe to changes against a particular planning item. When changes for that planning item appear, I should be to see a notification targeted me telling that planning item changed. Now, there's a whole lot more involved in changes, right? So it's not just what's changed. Because if I'm doing object comparison, hey Delta, how you doing? Good morning. If I'm doing object comparison, there's times when I'm going to have an associated ID. So I'm going to have to resolve that data as well. So that's going to be a challenge, because whatever system is going to build the notification needs to contain the entire system data as well, or have access to the system data. So we're going to get into an integration concern there. Stack Overflow survey is out. Stack Overflow survey hold as much value as it once did. Like the results or the actual ability to enter the Stack Overflow survey. The results. But again, Stack Overflow, unless I'm wrong, unless all of you are using Stack Overflow heavily and interacting with it on a daily basis, which I don't anymore. It's not as relevant as it once was. 66% of developers have a BS or an MAMS degree, despite only 49% of developers learn to code at school. But I don't know how relevant Stack Overflow is these days. I've heard more people griping about the quality of the content than I've heard saying, "Oh, go to Stack Overflow." Or is it just part of our world to the point where it's just still relevant as a learning resource? I mean, I suppose, I still reference it now and then. But again, it's become more challenging to navigate through. Like if I looked at some Angular stuff the other day. Was it Angular stuff? No, it was an answer on PHP, and it was 12 years old, and that's the top result that came up. And okay, 1 in 4 are 1 to 4, as in 25% report having 1 to 4 years of work experience. 25% of the respondents is that. The majority of response are early to mid-career professionals, and the majority of people managers are mid to late career professionals. Part of it is the better you are at coding, the less often Stack Overflow is used. Really? Because I think that APIs are pretty cool, but 75% of developers are more likely to endorse your technology if you provide access. Sorry for the mic bump there. Provide access to APIs. Make sure to let backend developers and engineering managers know about the API integrations. So I'm there. Morning module. So people managers, individual contributors or respondents. So ability to find knowledge and information, frequency of productivity frictions. Really? Well, so hold on. 30% of developers say knowledge silos impact their productivity 10 more times per week. 10 or more times per week. Knowledge silos aren't a problem for everyone. But if you have them, they're a frequent problem. So 52% never encounter knowledge silos. I mean, it's worth reviewing for certain. If anyone hasn't yet. Okay, that one is technical debt is a top frustration at work for professional developers, according to 63% of respondents. So 65,000 respondents, right? 1/4 find tracking their work. Industry. I think that one, software development remains a top industry for developers. I think some people don't understand how to categorize what they do. So you're telling me, yeah, that's not a good chart. That is a horrible chart. One in 5 developers are satisfied with the job they're doing, or with the work they're doing. But out of 65,000 people, that's a worrying stat. Like, you're telling me that is the biggest contributor to that. So that means that no matter what we do, for the most part, we will not solve fixing that. Been around the block enough that I know if I'm generally happy at work, I'm way in the minority. Factors that most contribute to job satisfaction: improving quality of code in developer environments, learning using new tech, building environments architecture, driving strategy with my team, being power user of a tool, working with new and quality hardware, open source contribution, not providing satisfaction. Nice. Well, I'm not gonna read through the survey, but yeah, entirely. But that is a worrying statistic. That is a worrying statistic that 1 in 5 developers are happy with their job. Because it's likely that, if you're looking for another job, you're more than likely going to be in an organization where you're going to be unhappy once you've got over the shiny new car smell. Joy. Okay, so let's try and get on with some coding today. Enough talking. So what I'm trying to represent here is that the notifications component really does have multiple things. So the ability for the user to say, I subscribe to this thing. So we're going to build on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a working version that does exactly what I'm asking it to do. And then I'm going to be comfortable with refactoring that and ripping it out as I learn more about how I'm going to tackle these things. Because being able to visualize the components in place will tell me how I feel about these things. So the general plan right now is that notifications will become a thing. Notifications will have two aspects, an API and a consumer side. Its consumer side, similar to Vue. Its consumer side will consume change events. Its API side will allow me to track a product, a planning item. And from there, we'll also record. We won't even, no, we won't. We won't overcomplicate this. We won't even record how I want to be notified yet. We'll not worry about how. We'll worry about I want to be notified. From there, we'll push to the communications an inbox message. So there'll be I actually think this might be service bus. Direct, yeah, this is service bus. This is Kafka. So it's a Kafka consumer with a service bus push. It's a send command. Notifications to communications this isn't a broadcast. You don't need to tell the world, hey, by the way, I need to send a message. You're going to say send a communication, and that communication is going to be an inbox message for the user with no notification flag set, with no, alert flag set. And we're going to say, hey, this planning item was updated by X user. That should give me enough visuals to understand who owns what data and when. This is going to get more complicated, way more complicated before it gets simpler, because there's going to be a lot of deciding who owns what data when, right? So is it my responsibility as a notification system to build the entire notification and then just a communication system to channel that notification? I think it is, which means that notifications actually ends up being massive, because notifications not only needs to consume all the information from planning, right? It needs to consume all the information from tenants, because it needs to know about users, it needs to know about IDs, it needs to know about all that sort of stuff. And any other system that it can notify upon, it needs to know all that information. So it's going to consume that information so that when it gets a change, it can consolidate the information and say, okay, well, this name changed from this to this. And if it can't gather that information yet, it actually has to hold on to that notification and wait until it's got all the information it requires to be able to send the notification, right? So a notification could potentially become stale in the time it takes to do that. Why make notifications a microservice? Why not just add that functionality to all services? Because then I put that responsibility on all services, and all services then not only are required to, well, share kernel in what, I mean, the amount of information I want to gather here is not tiny. So if I change an attachment, that's pretty minor change. But if I change a planning item and I change the review date on that thing, right? Planning is responsible for dealing with the planning item stuff. So now if I move notifications in, I also now have to build up a notification and understand about all this stuff. Well, notifications isn't just a library that I'm going to use. I need to gather information together. So if I change planning, if I change who the user is assigned to planning, planning doesn't know about users. It just knows that I've got an ID for a user. So planning doesn't have enough information to produce that notification, right? Planning doesn't own user, and it doesn't need to know about users. It just needs to know that a user ID, a user identifier, is a thing on a record, right? Tenant management owns users. So if I want to produce a notification that says, oh, this planning item was changed from user Bob to user Jim, planning can't do that without planning also consuming all the tenant management data, which is, again, a blurring of the lines of data ownership, and you end up in a messy world. So right now the database is only own the information they need to own, and everything else is references to other things, but they don't know about they don't know how to, they can't validate those references. Notifications have to have user information, emails, phone numbers, etc. If I change, well, notifications is the one responsible for sending, for building the message and channeling it to communications. So it will say send SMS, send email, send phone, send push notifications, send SMS, send email. Right? Notifications is the one that's going to do that. So it's going to have an API for me to configure what I want to be notified on and how. And it's going to know, it can send a command to communications to do it. Communications is the one going to be responsible for understanding those pieces. But if I put notifications as a library attached to everything, then they don't have enough context of the information. And view isn't the one to do that, because view is responsible for displaying the view. Yeah. Don't forget, this is data flow. This is not any responsibility. This is the way that data is flowing through the system. I'm not trying to create a domain diagram necessarily. It might look it, but it's like, I'm just trying to map the data. View is, so it's used of either consuming information through a view or a notification. Well, view is a consolidation of the information into a friendly manner, right? So the view is providing, nothing's running, so this won't work. The grid, the data there, the planning items with the users shown on it, all that information is being consolidated down into what I've termed view right now, right? Notifications are intended to prompt the user at their request, right? So view doesn't, and I don't want to make view and notifications a part of view, because then it becomes messier. And I'm actually going to remove some code from view, because I actually did test push notifications in view, but that now goes to communications. And communications will have its own GraphQL API. That wasn't what I was implying with making the same. No. Right. Yeah. And it's the benefit and the curse of the way I'm doing this, right? In that there's a source of truth. So users are owned by tenant management. No other system owns users other systems can consume user information, right? And this will be fun for GDPR stuff, right? Um, so other systems can consume user information, right? A user email needs to be tracked in communications. In hexagonal, I think those two are out adapters, right? But view consumes the user, so it can actually just, you know, display that information. Because again, view is a GraphQL API with some consumers in the background pulling the information and consolidating the database. The reason view is there is because it can make that database fast for read and never would needs to worry about the write. Could notifications just consume the view? No, because it's a separate database with separate concerns. And changes are calculated. Actually, that one doesn't necessarily need to go there. No, it does. It does need to go there because if I want to display the actual changes, now that can actually consolidate that information properly. In terms of notification, I need to pull all that information again. And I get that it might seem overly complicated to have the data being pushed into different places in the same sort of ways, but they can now do what they want with that data without having to have access to another database or responsibility, which means that I can switch out components, I can switch out pieces, and they're completely independent of one another. They have their own data, which is why this is modular monolith rather than microservices. The interface between changes to view and changes to notification is the same. The interface, Kafka, that's just, they're consuming Kafka. They're consuming this topic. That's all that's representing. Same topic. They're both consumers of that topic. Same exact message, yeah. Yeah, maybe I'm trying to read too much into interface there. Yeah, yeah, they're both sets of Kafka consumers. They're both set up to subscribe to that message, to that topic, and consume messages from that independently. And that's why I like using Kafka. These are service bus. These are commands. And I'm not sure that doesn't go, but for right now, that goes there. I can understand more why view doesn't go to notifications. Yeah. So this is consolidating the data down so that I can display it on the screen, right? It's very much giving me the ability to optimize the schema, put store procedures in if I need to, put, do whatever I need to do to get the display out. And actually this has this essentially exposes the DB context. So I use a set of views to expose the DB context to the actual GraphQL API. This will not have a direct query, right? This only has it'll channel information in. Right, it'll channel information in. It will pull changes in, it will have an API attached to it. And the challenge is I can't represent this hop, right? I'm just kind of showing right now data flow. But the this will consume this. It will have an API. That API will provide the client the ability to say, I care about this planning item in this version. When it says that, when it consumes that planning item, if it's got notification things to actually monitor, it will test to see, do I need to notify on this thing? And if it does, right now I'm going to make it one request type, which is, push to user inbox, and then that will be the message will be constructed in here and sent out to communications. And communications is solely responsible for doing the communication component, right? But communications will have its own GraphQL API because the client will consume that GraphQL API for push notifications and for because you can use subscriptions to GraphQL. So I can subscribe to the notifications channel in communication, or the push notification channel, whatever. And I'll have an inbox, so that'll be able to push data down to the client. So again, what I'm trying to represent is the flow of data from the client down, but the diagram gets more complex with data flows. Changes adds another hop between planning and its only connection is planning to view. Should planning and changes be one thing? No, because this is going to be way bigger, right? Right now, I need the proof of concept in place. So planning is the only provider to changes. But if you look to the topics, right? Attachment changes, not likely. Project changes, likely. Tenant changes, likely. Tenant user changes, likely, potentially. But when I get to tickets, when I get to comments, when I get to all sorts of other stuff, they will produce changes of their own. So changes is meant to be a processor of changes. Planning has meaning to other systems. Planning has meaning to other systems. Like planning should be shown in the view. Yeah, it needs a web interface. Yeah, so the data that planning. So again, planning produces its data into view because it publishes integration events. So those integration events are what the view consumes. But planning doesn't expose its data publicly. But it's the source of truth for planning, for requirements, for commenter, for notes on planning, for all those sorts of things. Planning is the source of truth. So there's no web interface to planning deliberately. No outgoing interface. Is there a system after planning? So go back to this one. Yeah, there'll be more like ticketing, right? That is existing. It just doesn't get used right now. Oh, stories will be separate. Still, so that's support ticketing, right? Right. That's intended to be designed, and then stories. I even build ticketing because I think it is a useful part of the flow. If we're tracking work isn't all just imagined and then added, right? So planning isn't the only thing that will produce stories. support tickets will, your unique value prop is planning, is why I thought that. Right. Yeah. And that's why I'm focused on planning, right? Which may kind of skew understanding for certain. But to really build this system the way it should be built, I have to do the support ticketing and then pivot. Well, I have to pivot after planning to stories and then back to support ticketing if I want to do that. Those systems should be quicker to develop because the patterns and the practices should be pretty much established and understood at that point. And essentially, if I can get to a good point and someone else can join me in development, then building support ticketing or stories could be an isolated component that is built with an understanding of what interfaces there are. Yes. Yeah, you could use planning for dog food. So, yeah. And once we get this basic notification piece in, and monitoring, monitoring is a separate concern because monitoring is kind of, I want to watch for things that are X days old sort of thing. That's a different kind of change, right? That's a not changed. Um, and that may get merged into changes. And will ticketing be interchangeable in the diagram of planning? You mean this diagram or this diagram? Which one do you mean? I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure I follow with interchangeable. The one you want, this one. Well, yeah, yes. So I could do. Let's make you. Yeah. Um, planning. This could be ticketing. Right. Yeah. What I use here, right? Um, it's funny, but yeah, ticketing could go in here, and ticketing will have all the same arrows, right? So it has all the same concerns, yeah, because it will go to changes, it will go to monitoring, it will go to notifications, it will go to view, because the user will be building the again, this is going to be the heavier hit system ultimately because this is going to consume all the data and be responsible for displaying it. But you can scale this independently of everything else, right? Ticketing, stories, they all live as individual blobs. They get interacted with HTTP. They all, yeah. Ticketing and planning, well, yeah, because they'll be producing, again, if you look at the way the topics are laid out, liquid sky planning items, right? So tickets, notes, etc. Liquid sky planning items, liquid sky ticketing. I don't think there is a tickets one yet, right? There'll be ticket streams and all sorts of other stuff. There'll be dozens and dozens of topics eventually, right? And everything that kind of changes will have a changes topic. Yeah. So if they were more generic, it'd be easy to assume the messages. But why? Why do they need to be more generic? And why would that make it easier? It might make it easier from a data, but the information they contain won't be the same. their context, just because they're going to the same places doesn't mean they don't carry extra content or different contexts, etc. Right? These other systems have their jobs to do with that data, right? So when a ticket is changed, let's say it's the ticket shifts from in progress to completed. That's a change. It's going to trigger a change. The notification is going to be there, and someone might have, hey, I want to be told when a ticket is completed, right? They get told about ticket completed. So the flow, the diagram is representing the data flows of the messages, but the usage and how their understanding is all. Tape panning, ticketing, monitoring. Monitoring is doing very similar things with data regardless of the feeding system. Yeah. And changes is doing very similar things. But just because you give them a generic message doesn't make it any simpler. Right? So what I'm trying to build, what I'm trying to establish is not that just because it makes, you know, more things that it's bad. Well, again, how it calculates changes is going to be very similar, right? So there is a in the changes component, um, there is um, the calculation of changes, right? So it does go through, it looks through the objects, it looks through the lists, etc., and it establishes was changed and gives you the before and after for the properties, right? So there is code in there for dealing with the differences. That is going to work no matter what I consume. Can you show the messages? Which messages? Changes? Yeah, these messages are going to look identical. You mean that one? Busy today, so can't stay long, but I hope you have a good stream. Manatonics, thank you very much for coming and stopping by. Have a great day. Appreciate it. So you're thinking because this is, I could make this changes as a stream and just tack on the object type. Yes, you are completely correct there. The consumer of these events could, yeah, yes, you are completely correct. There is no difference between a planning item change and a ticketing change in that respect. Absolutely, I could make that generic. But again, if you only care about planning item changes, you now can't tell A from B. You have to do something else so the way I could do this, I could put in a changes stream, so liquid sky.changes, and then I could use Kafka streams or KSQLDB to split out the ones I want if I wanted to do something separate, right? But yeah, you are completely correct. However, the only difference is this gives me a quicker way of knowing, and it gives me more throughput, right? Because I can actually process planning item changes separately from ticketing changes. I can actually scale them differently. I can deal with them differently. If I make it all one changes stream, I have to scale out changes. So it's not just the code design that I have to consider. It's the data design and the infrastructure design. There could be two separate streams in the same messaging stream, but just enforce that in code. They could drift apart. But you're not going to get a ticketing. I guess I'm not following entirely. They could drift apart. The same messages are going to get produced to two streams, though, right? You could, but my point was, you could say liquid sky.changes and then have planning item versus you could have actually an identifier here, planning item, ticketing, etc. Right. The reason for change. I mean, there's no way this is going to be sufficient, right? I know there's going to be deficiencies here that I'm going to have to figure out. One of those challenges is going to be this consumption, right? Because again, it's all very well and good when I'm changing data that is available to me. So the review date is available to me, right? But if I change, there we go, source, if I change something like an identifier user, I don't have context in the changes system of who that is, right? And changes isn't responsible for that. So that's why I need to consume those same messages in here so that I can constitute that information properly. It seems like the downstream process should define the message though, not planning items. Well, so the challenge in when we're talking about events, and this is one I've always kind of got stuck on, is when you're doing events, who is it to say, like, you're producing the information you're willing to share. You're not producing the information that a certain system needs, right? So you should expose the most amount of information that you're willing to share. Everything else should stay internal. It's up to the individual consumers to decide what they need from that message, right? Because when I'm doing the integration events, I'm publishing this information so that any other consumer system can actually pull that information if they need, right? Yes, I might have security around certain parts, right? Well, I will ultimately have security around all parts, but tighter security. So for tenant management, if I'm producing users, right, only certain consumers should be allowed to consume users because there's email information in there, right? So I have to lock that down so that only certain consumers are allowed to see that information, right? Tenant management doesn't need to publish notifications, doesn't need to have certain information, maybe. So I might end up putting extra pipelines in place. The same message. So I see. So does that imply the same message goes to changes as monitoring? So when planning produces this, right? If we're being realistic, right? This message right now is from Liquid Sky dot planning items, right? That's the topic that is produced. That's the topic that's being consumed from all these four. So that topic looks like this, right? So that's the message. And this is slightly off because these requirements, they're going to have to be their own feed. They're going to have to be their own stream because they're too big. These are going to be a list of identifiers eventually. Because they have identifiers anyway. It's just going to be an array of identifiers, and these are going to be produced independently. But not the point. So yeah, the changes, the monitoring, the notifications, the view will all consume this same topic and this same message. Right, and I don't want to make it more generic. There's no point making these endpoints more generic because I actually do want to publish the data. It's an intentional act of publishing the integration event to the larger system. The benefit is if I want to bring up a new system, right? Let's say, actually going back to my original diagram, right? I've removed it because it's future, right? But let's say 6 months from now, I finally get to the point where things are working nicely, right? I want to introduce the ability to search. Using GraphQL with the existing data schema isn't a good use for search, right? Because I've modified this schema to be very normalized or denormalized or whatever in an appropriate way so that I can actually read the view data back to the client. I've said, okay, we're going to move this data around. We're going to change this. I can change that view specifically to support the speed of the view. However, if I want to search 6 months from now, well, I can't search against that. It's not really good. So what I do is I go, oh, well, I'm going to introduce Elasticsearch, right? and now I consume those same events, right? I obviously have to. I've got to do some ETL pipeline stuff to do. Take the data out of these things, query the data out of these things, and push them into a system to initialize it. So it's got a starting point, but then Elasticsearch starts consuming the same events, and now Elasticsearch can build indexes and search indexes. I can now put an API in front of Elasticsearch and put it through my gateway, and my client can just call search, and it doesn't care because of the gateway as to which one it's going to go to. It would be interesting to use the system to develop my cloud company project. I would be lying, and I kind of said this to you the day when we were on the call, right? I was like, it's interesting how differently I would design this, because I would use messaging and eventing, because some of those processes are asynchronous. Some of those processes are not real time necessarily, right? Because a cab might take 20 or 30 minutes, and then it publishes the event. Yep, I've dropped off my fare. I'm available again. And the system goes, oh, okay, you're available. This cab is now available again, by the way. So then when a dispatcher is called, that asynchronous nature. So yeah, use you, okay. So we're talking about different things, but from yeah. So I was watching what you were doing and thinking your cab system actually would benefit from like this sort of design. Um, yeah, yeah. I would approach the challenge very differently. Yeah. So, but yeah, the benefit of doing the Kafka messaging the way I'm doing it, right, is a state. In that case, it's a state of the object, the integration event. So that's why this doesn't have an expansion over here, because this doesn't publish integration events, right? This has a write API to trap information. This database is really share. It's the same database, right? Um, but yeah, I can now expand the system without modifying the system, and that's why these are the way they are. Once the dispatcher is made and I get into the other systems, I can start introducing that tech. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So the dogs believe that my room is a hoarding place for toys and chewing place. So they go out and bring all the toys into my room and chew everything. I keep hearing little pitter patter of feet, and as they run down the hallway, bring new toys to chew. Okay, so yeah, that is that. I and through that. So it it to someone who hasn't developed, and I'm not. Room is a safe space. Yeah, yeah, very safe space. I have to sweep it daily. Um, so if you're used to that monolithic mentality, if you're used to the application has a database, this sort of design can seem very alien and very inefficient, and I can see why. Like, and I suppose, like, to me, microservices never made sense because it was breaking things up into real granularity. I'm not building microservices here. I am building a module, a monolith, but breaking the responsibilities of these things up, allowing me to. These are the sources of truth. These are the things that certain things would have to get backed up, but certain things are recreatable, right? Changes is ephemeral. Ephemeral? Do I mean ephemeral? It doesn't need to have any necessary state other than the last version of the object it saw. So if you need to regenerate changes, you just say populate changes with all the planning items. Now everything's a change, right? Um, Monitoring, it's kind of, you like monolithic files. Well, you would certainly know a monolithic file when you saw one, that's for certain. I'd say the word monolithic. Um, so if you're used to that application design of there is an application and it has a database, a lot of this can seem wasteful. Like, why do you need to do that? It's in the same place, right? So if you're building an application that is built around one database, why bother? But the problem is that over time, when you're doing that sort of stuff, when you're building an application like that, you'll have a need. You'll have that moment where, like, oh, the database is slow. What do you mean the database is slow? We've got a lot of deadlock. So or it's really slow to query this table. Oh, we need to go and add an index to that table. Okay, we added an index. Well, now it's conflicting, and now there's challenges with performance because now we're writing all this information into it, and those, it's not performing as well. So you end up pushing and pulling a little bit. No, it's not always that difficult. It's manageable. We've done it for a long time, and we still continue to do it. But with this design, I can change a component of the system. I can change the technologies. I can change the internal infrastructure. I can change the code and test it independently of the rest of the system. It has its own data, and the point at which I've been thinking about what I need to do to be able to establish this system properly. And what I'm going to need at some point is I'm going to need, and I'll refer to it as ETL pipelines, but what I need is a command line tool where I can say, here's a format that I want to consume the data in, and I want to consume it. I want to consume these records from these systems, and now go. And it will produce the data in a format I can import, or it will directly feed it into the other system. Right. So I need to create an adapter or something for each one to understand how to populate its state from that. And the reason I need that is because some of these systems, Vue does not care, right? If I go to production, Vue is completely stateless, i.e., it can, as long as it can consume all the data from the other things, it can build itself again, right? So I could wipe out the view and rebuild it. So if I need to deliver changes to the view that are major, right? I change the schema, I change how I pull data, I change the GraphQL API. There's a major change coming in the client and the view architecture stuff, right? What I do is on Friday afternoon or Friday evening, I wipe out the view system, I delete its data, I run the pipelines to produce the new database in the new format, and I deploy the new view and the new client, and everything's good, right? None of the other systems had to change. None of the other systems had to come down. The existing client could stay up and still produce data into it, right? And I could just switch over, and there's no, oh, I need to do migrations. I need to do this. I need to do that. There is no migration because I can just rebuild the state of the system. And that's a key benefit of doing it this way, right? I don't have to change planning to change view. I don't have to change the changes system because tenant management changed, right? If this produces a different message, that's when this is going to get tricky. When these messages change, that's when the system gets harder to deal with. That's when I might have to look at Kafka schema. And because then these systems basically say, I don't know how to consume that message. So until they update, they won't consume. So they won't go and consume a bad message. Then you update the system, change out the notification system and update the schema. Now it knows how to pull and it'll continue processing, right? So you can actually swap out, you can actually not risk breaking the system using Kafka schema. The way it is now, it'll try and consume and fail. So you've got a limited time to fix it. But yeah. So I know I haven't done much coding. I haven't done any coding yet, but this is important to kind of figure out, and it is useful. And this is, again, I will do another community day. We've obviously got the calls we've been having in Discord, which I've really enjoyed doing. So I'm open to questions on this stuff, and definitely happy to talk about this and walk through anytime. So, notifications. We're going to start simple, right? So as a user, I want to be notified via inbox message that a planning item has changed. This is the API side of this. Right. All right. Off to work for me. Good luck all. Doctor, have a great day. Thank you for the conversation. It's very useful to do that. I love the challenges and the conversation, as always. Thank you. So this, I'm going to continue my pattern of breaking these down into server side and client side, right? And actually, if we're doing this correctly, there's an API. There's an API, a notification message should be queued. I might need to do an outbox and send. That's going to be challenging. Yeah. When changes for that planning item appear, a notification message should be sent. So the challenge there is this is this piece here, right? Notifications. I don't want to do this part yet. I want to make that a separate piece of work because if we're doing this the way that I would imagine this would work eventually, I am going to be responsible for notifications. You are going to be responsible for communications, right? Because again, these projects, these folders here could actually be a solution of their own with the dependent libraries. But each one of these could be a solution of their own that is completely separate to everyone else, right? That might be worth me trying to figure out at some point. But because I'm a solo developer, that would be nightmarish to separate them into different solutions or different Git repositories even. But I could do it because these are standalone with the exception of shared kernel and messaging, right? And even you could argue that this is kind of shared kernel, right? These are the integration events. This is the MassTransit publishing piece. It's more, that should be there really. Yeah, let's worry about that later. Yeah. This is actually the front end. This is just because I don't work on it inside of the application, inside of this. That can go away. Initially, I was going to plan on showing different clients, but yeah, that's why that's called Angular View. But we've gone way past that now. The only way that's going to change is if all of a sudden I have an inspiration to do something like Blazor and Blazor becomes more apparent and I can rebuild the UI in Blazor. But I do not fancy hooking up GraphQL and things in Blazor and trying to build an alternative UI that I don't want to necessarily support. So Angular it is for now. But again, I'm trying to promote that it is possible to have these things disconnected. What are you doing, dog? No. Shooting a football. An actual football. The round one. Okay. So, my favorite word. As a, I'm going to say as a user, the proper one. Yeah, I said an actual football. As a user, I should um, um, be able to um, the problem is here, and this is where planning becomes difficult, and this is why I'm doing planning, right? Because of the dreamt up requirements, right? Because you to a PM who doesn't necessarily understand technology, there's one thing they want to do here. They want to see on the client an inbox, and that's what they're picturing, right? They're picturing an inbox on the client that is going to contain a message to say the planning item titled X was changed by user Bob. That's what they want to see, right? So if they're entering a planning item for this, that's what they're typing in. I want to see on the client this. The requirements that they build are all going to be based around that understanding, right? The technical requirements are not the same as the user requirements because they don't understand the technical components behind the scenes, which is why I always struggle with stories that are, it must be user focused. Because if you think about it from that perspective, here's what's going to happen for that inbox notification to happen. On the change of a planning item, the change has to calculate. So we need to support that, which we do now. The notification system has to allow you to say, I care about this item. So we need to build that piece. So we need to say, okay, one of the requirements is on the UI, I should have a screen that allows me or a mark on the planning item to say, notify me of changes to this, right? So a subscription button or something on the UI to tell me I care about this planning item. So the notifications needs an API. That API needs to receive that command from the client. So we've got a UI concern on the view, the Angular side. We've got a API requirement on the notification system. We've got a new table, a new storage to track that. Then we've got to consume the changes. Those changes have to be reconstituted to publish the correct notification. Now, right now we can go with simple, this item has changed, but maybe we want to produce the actual changes as a readable form. So who does that? How do they do it? That's why I'm not worrying about it right now, because I've still got to kind of rectify that. Then that publishes a notification to communications inbox, and that inbox has a GraphQL component. So to do that as a user story is massive. But if I break it up into actual stories that are system oriented, and that's why I kind of want to do the whole, no, not API gateway. Yeah, API gateway. You can start API gateway in GraphQL. Demonstrate this. Again, if you're new to the stream, if there's anyone new in the stream, you're more than welcome to ask questions. You're more than welcome to I will answer what I can. If you think that I'm doing something wrong, if you think I'm misunderstanding a concept, it's also okay to call that out. I don't want to just be doing something because I think I know it all, right? I do want to learn. So don't be afraid to challenge. So if we go to the client, loady. Log in. Reloading. Sign in. There you go. It's why I've put these as tags and not as this is on the tenant management, because the planning, the product manager, when they're building their requirements, they don't understand what systems are attached. The idea of this entire thing is that they converse with the development teams and they say, well, hold on, that has planning concerns and notifications concerns, right? That's erroring. That's why, because I don't have the right systems up behind. But that's why these are there, and that will trigger people. That's why I want notifications around this part, because if a notifications system planning item is added, the people on notifications team the developers could actually be alerted to the fact that a story has been added for notifications, and they might want to review it. Right now, it's a planning item, so that that might not be something that you intend to happen, but it does give visibility into that piece. And then the requirements, these would be discussed with developers. So the requirements could become technical, but they start off as a wish list, right? I should be able to see the dashboard. I should be able to see this. I should be able to see that. But then when these are actually built, they can go to the relevant teams that need to work on those pieces. Oh, you need to do this. Well, to get that alert notification, well, the notifications team needs to deal with that part. So we'll assign that to notifications team. We'll assign or notifications group, or whatever, because they're working on that project. That's the way I intend this to be built. So it's discussion based. It doesn't actually yield stories immediately. There's nothing to actually work on. There's just a discussion to be had around this piece, and we can build out the requirements as they need to be. Once I get into dog food in this, it's going to kind of highlight some of the failings there. I know that it's not perfect, but it will allow me to show what I intend to happen. But again, the idea is one of the stories are not necessarily clear cut. As a user, I want to be notified via inbox message. So if I'm doing this technically, right? Provide API for notifications to track planning items. API for notifications should allow a user to indicate they care about a planning item. I'm just going to leave it at that right in a second. I don't really want to overthink this too much right now because I want to get some coding done before the day is out. So we're going to check out. Okay, let's make sure that's got all the latest changes. Let's delete this branch. That's the new branch feature. I think that was T89. 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 Notifications. Subscription API. And what I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to try and develop this in a very in an agile way, right? I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to develop what I need and build up on it and be willing to change it, because the challenge here is one of I don't have all the answers, and I don't really, like I said right at the beginning of the stream, I don't want to solve the world here. What I want to solve is my immediate need, and that is I want to subscribe to a change. I want to subscribe to an entity. In this case, the only entity I have is planning items. So we're going to allow subscription to planning items. So let's create a new solution folder. We go again. Let's make sure it's spelled out right. Notifications. Always worth checking. It's very easy to miss spellings. So let's add a new project and exceptions. Yep. Notifications. So I'm going to start at the application. I'm not going to start the API. And I know we need notifications domain. My room looks like a shredder lost its insides. and it's not just paper. Notifications, infrastructure, fluff, plastics, leather, fabrics, just torn up behind me everywhere. This is why we don't get the many nylon and plastic toys anymore. Oh, these two, if they get anywhere near cardboard, we're in trouble. Paper, Loki specifically loves paper. Hi, Modex. How you doing? Welcome in. Toys for chewers. 12 hours. That's all they last. Okay. Um, do I have any good suggestions on how to write a good game design document? No, but Thor does, doesn't he? Um, this will be relatively simple. That is pretty much now become the de facto standard for that. Like he does everything. Um, um, wow, he's even gone into community building stuff now. But yeah, he's got an entire piece. He's got an example game design document as a template. So I think Pirate Software 4 has become pretty much the go-to developer for all game development at this point. He's just nailed. Yeah, game design document is not something that, like, to me as a developer, an application developer, a game design document. Actually, when I first started writing software, when I first started working, I essentially wrote a design document for all the software, right? Um, like I will do this and it will do this, and these are the challenges and these are the consequences, etc. And this is what I need to do, and I need to talk to these people, and I need like it was a design document from the scratch. And some days I think maybe that would actually be pretty useful. But the problem is it from a from that perspective, from my application developer perspective, it becomes um defining, and then you can't move outside those rules. So agility kind of flies in the face of that. But a game design document, I get why. Okay, so let's go build tests. New project. I think it's tests, right? Tests, yeah. Notifications, application, tests. I think am I following a weird convention there? Yes, I am. Hyphens in some, periods in others. Nothing like consistency. Notifications, application tests. Yes. Okay. Concerning entity subscription. Oh, no. Concerning planning item subscription. When um, user subscribes to planning item. I did my usual here. I completely neglected to use a unit test thing, and I then have to go and add the dependencies in myself. X unit. So, Mojo, you were talking about someone starting with a unit test the other day and just immediately just doing these things. After a while, once you've written enough unit tests, you start to just do these things automatically. So including XUnit, then my GTD is pretty decent. Nice. If you compared it against that, so for the game jams that Pirate Software does, that's the kind of recommendation he does. So yeah, so a lot of people are trying to follow that advice these days. Gotcha. Again, I'd say ultimately the game design document is something for you to use to make sure you're capturing those dreams, right? So it's not there's one way of doing it. It's just an effective template from which to use because by someone who's actually done that sort of stuff. Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so let's do some facts. When you use a subscribe to a planning item, um, now it doesn't matter if the entity exists yet. It just matters that I'm subscribing to it, right? Because this is not a I don't need to check the planning item. I know about planning item yet because I might not know about it at this point. But that doesn't stop me from saying I care about subscribing to it. When user subscribes to a planning item, I think I misunderstood unit testing. Open to questions if you wanna ask any. Um, and no subscription exists. Subscription is created. That's pretty much it. I just need to validate that it's created. So there's a few ways of doing the unit test here, right? And actually, this one might be a benefit of the other style. So when user subscribes to a planning item, let's do it this way. And no subscription exists. Subscription is created. I couldn't figure out where to start the process. I started a new testing project, an API project, but couldn't figure the endpoint to hit. Right. You don't need to. That's the point of unit testing, right? You don't care about the other technology. It's why I'm starting here. So there's no application, there's no domain, there's no infrastructure. And this is TDD, right? I'm starting from this percent thing. So I need to assert, I need to arrange, I need to act, I need to assert. So I use a different style for most of my unit tests because I kind of like assertions to be the only thing in there. But I'm actually going to set this up a little differently because I think it just benefits the readability in this case because they're so simple, right? So we're going to do what happens when the subscription doesn't exist and subscription exists. No, subscription is updated. I'm going to capture the fact that they updated it as a indicator that they care about it, right? End up getting it with the starter weather forecast code. Source, unit tests. But your integration testing there. Yeah, you you've got the structure. Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to test is the behavior, right? I want to test the given I mean, they passed it. When you're unit testing, what you want to test, you want to control the inputs. And given the inputs, you have a known output, right? A known behavior, a known side effect. So that's what unit testing is about. It's saying if these situations occur, then this is what happens. That's what unit testing. And you're going to do it at the most granular level. So here I'm going to test my command handler for subscribe to planning item, right? That's what I'm going to test. Hello. 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 You giving kisses? So yeah, I'm going to test my command handler, and that's all I'm testing. The API, the thing that invokes that command handler, that's nothing to do with this, right? That's all peripheral. If I want to test what happens when I call an endpoint, does it update a database? That's an integration test, right? You can use unit tests. Yeah, you can use unit tests to build integration tests, but the way you set things up is going to be different. Okay, so I need a subject. So again, I'm going to provide a subject here. So private subscribe to planning item dot handler. It's my subject, right? That's the thing I'm going to create. It doesn't exist yet. That's fine. So I need to create a new handler. Subject equals new. Come on, subscribe to planning item dot handler. This is okay. It's not. I'm not doing things wrong. I'm doing things wrong deliberately here. So I'm going to create a new subject, and then I want to say subject dot handle new subscribe to planning item dot command, and it's going to contain one thing, planning item identifier. No, it's going to contain two things, user identifier and planning item identifier. So then let's create some user identifier equals grid dot new grid and private read only grid planning item identifier equals grid new grid. This is my test data, again, my inputs, right? And my assertion is going to be that my repository dot received add async arg dot is a new subscript an entity subscription. We're going to go, well, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not going to provide some generic behavior there. There's no benefit in calling that planning item. And this subscription is going to have subscription dot entity identifier equals planning item identifier and s dot subscriber equals user identifier and s dot entity type equals type of. Actually, do I need anything other than let's do string for now. Just make that a field. Planning item entity type. So just entity type. It's kind of redundant. Introduce make read only. So that follows that path. So we're validating that we actually received that command. So now we need a repository. So private I repository. This is going to be of entity subscription repository. So here's what I want to test. I need some pieces in between. So now let's build the things out to make it at least construct. So iRepository, shared kernel, entity subscription, we don't have one. So rather than do this all in, I can do this all in here and then move it out, but I'm just going to, I know what I'm about to do. So entities, and this is going to be an entity subscription. This is going to have public period, public int ID. I'm still going with integer IDs. Public GUID entity identifier, public GUID subscriber identifier. That's all I need right now. I don't need any more. So now we can include notifications domain there. Things start to get a bit better. In our application, let's call this planning item subscriptions. Oh, actually, subscribe to planning item. And then this is going to be the, no. Now we're going to end up public record command. That's going to say get GUID user identifier. I command result. We're going to need manage our dice.result. So there's some practices that are advised when doing unit testing, and one of them is like Yagni, kind of follow that. I'm not going to need this. I'm not going to need this, because it's very easy to go away with assuming here's what I want to happen. Some of the things along the way, you just know, right? I'm not slowing myself down. Did that not install? A dash result. Oh, because I got Windows input there. I'm not going to slow myself down entirely and say that that's not required. That's not required. Oh, I shouldn't do that. That's fine. It's just I'm just lying to myself. I know what I need to do at certain things. So ambiguous invocation is arg.any cancellation token. Entity type. We know we need entity type. Nope. Public string entity type. Actually, that's kind of a key piece of information. And that's just a name right now. So that's going to be something to worry about later. Let's create a repository equals. This is a substitute. So one of the things with the unit testing is what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are not providing implementations for things you're not testing. So I'm testing the handler. So everything else that gets passed into the handler, the dependencies of that handler should not be real things. They should be, and Dota doesn't like mocks, but I like mocks. I don't like creating fakes for things like that you know, behave or have extra code to them. So mocks are a very useful way of doing that. And then substitute is the library I'm using, mainly because I didn't like the stuff that went on with mock-u. So that's just a continued snub of that library, even though the problem's gone away, I believe. Anyway, so now let's create a handler. So public class handler, I command handler, yeah. So it takes the command, returns the result. Awesome, great. That's just going to complain because, yeah. Value task is it will not create a task if you do not do something that is actually using the task. If you don't await anything in here or return a task at all, it will run it synchronously and never creates the actual resources. Whereas if you create a task, it always assigns the resources for a task. So apparently that's the difference. Okay, so we're going to handle that and we're going to send in cancellation token.none and get a way to get a result because it's task. What does that want to do? Test method should not use blocking test. Use an async test method and await instead. So they're saying async task and then await that. I've never done that. I'll do it for the case of this because it can be done. In the other stuff, that's a tough one because I'm not actually interesting. We'll see how that goes. So I should be able to run the test, install an extra library. Luckily, Rider doesn't tell me that that needs to be done. That can actually trip you up. Microsoft.NET SDK needs to be installed. Test SDK. So let's run the tests. I'm not writing the code. I want the test to fail. I don't want to get complacent and think I've got a passing test when I don't have a passing test. I also don't want to do that. I should have run that, not. Okay, you go. Failing tests. Believe that is a standard I should follow. I need to test it. I think it was Nick Chapsis said that because these would never be extended. I would never inherit from these. It would be a very deliberate effort if I wanted to extend or inherit from anything in here. And the suggestion was that this does create a performance change. So I want to test that at some point. So I keep putting it on so that I keep reminding myself to do the performance testing so I can understand that advice. I understand what it does. I just don't understand why it would introduce performance improvements. So I'm just checking there's no dog behind me to stretch out. Okay, so let's make that one test, that pass. So we need the repository, right? We're going to need to, what we're going to do here is we're going to say, hey, I want to subscribe to this thing and we want to see a record. That's it. So we go in here and we know we need a repository of entity subscription. What should be interesting is how much stuff I can include without actually having a database there, without having any sort of pieces in place. Off to work, time to stare at a 7,000 line method. Later. Make it 6,800 lines today. Just delete some code. Have a great day, Mojo. Take care. Oh no, you want to add more? No. Delete. Refactor. Refactor it. Make it 5,000 Methods. Actually, that would be a way of refactoring that, by the way. Break it out into methods. Like we did with your method the other day. That would actually be the way to refactor that code. Have a good one. Oh, shit. So here what we're going to do is we're going to do repository.add async. Now, this is the subscribe to planning item. I know it's the subscribe to planning item. I don't need to do anything special here. So we're going to do new entity subscription. That's going to take an entity identifier, which is going to be our request, which we're going to rename in a second as our planning item identifier. Entity type is planning item. We can hard code as a string. And there we go. Pass that cancellation token down. We can await that, sync that, right? And there we go. Return result. That's success. Let's make that command. We can go back here. We now need to input our repository there. We've already faked. And now we should run the test and we probably should pass. Yeah, we got to pass. Okay, so now let's fix this one. So our arrange and our act look almost identical. Right. Almost identical. This is where my testing style gets right. That should be then. The only difference is repository dot. Actually, watch this. The assert that we're actually looking for here is going to be received update. It knows from the context. I'm going to let the AI do that. That is perfectly acceptable. It's going to write exactly what I'm about to write. This will fail. Right? I want to make sure. I want to see red first. I don't want to go and make it pass artificially. So I'm not going to write any code I don't need to write yet. So now we need to call update. So to get to update, we need to check if it exists. So we need to set up our repository so that when we go and get first to default arg.is, actually this doesn't really matter, I single results, well, right. We need a specification. So this would be subscription by entity identifier and type spec. And this will take, yeah, that's I need to learn if there's a way of testing the specifications library like that. Dot returns, and we need to return a new entity subscription, and that's going to have ID equals 1, identifier, entity type, subscriber identifier. Let's create that. And let's move that to folder. That goes to application, goes to source, notification. I forget that it uses this. It uses a solution folders, not the actual code folders. Notifications application, specifications, planning item subscription, specifications. Let's go there for right a second. right? And then this is going to need specifications. So we need a Dallas. Dallas.specification. And this is going to be a specification of entity subscription and an I single result specification. Most of what I'm doing needs a single result specification. So CTOR, and then, yeah, and it helps if I type it right. Subscription by entity identifier and type spec. So intended inheritance. So this takes a GUID identifier and a string type. Not a record, not a record, not a record. That's creating some confusion for me, but I'm glad the tools are stopping from doing that sort of weird stuff. And then a query where S goes to S dot entity type, the entity identifier equals identifier, and S dot entity type equals type. That's our query. So now in here, var existing equals repository dot first or default new subscription. We take command dot planning item identifier and planning item cancellation token in there. If existing is null, else. Gotta await things. Oh, good point. That will not give me first default. That would get me all the subscriptions. Subscription for user by user type and identifier spec. I'm just trying to be descriptive there. GUID user identifier s dot subscriber identifier equals. So hold on, let's be. So the problem there. Let's be clear. We know what it means. It's not like it's alien. So command dot user identifier. Make a constant out of that field. Place two occurrences. Use constant entity type. Yeah. This actually will become quite a generic behavior, I would imagine, for the subscription. So we probably would end up changing this, but for right now, I'm not going to worry about it. So now, what do I update? Right, I don't have anything to update, so I need to identify that s dot last updated is not null. Because what we could do is s.last updated. That's added. Doesn't really matter. But s.last updated is null. Might not actually like that in that. We'll see. Let's add that. Really? Because it doesn't know it's on entity subscription. Public date time. Last updated. So on the topic of last updated, and I probably do want date added, don't I? Right. Cannot convert null. Oh, last updated should be nullable. Yeah, that one does need to be nullable. Yeah, cannot. Yeah, I thought an expression tree. Not equal to null. So we can run the test and validate it fails again. We know the add will still work because even though I changed it, I didn't change the fact that it doesn't change last updated. We probably do want to set date added though and capture that. And I need to finish, but let's get that done. So let's go in here and let's do await repository dot update async. So existing dot last updated equal date time UTC now. So now when we run the unit test, there we go, got that working. So let's add public date time date added. And s dot date added. Not equal to null. How do I do that then? And s dot date added greater than date time dot UTC now add seconds -5. Right, it's within 5 seconds of when this ran. Right, it will default to default the daytime now, so it's failed again. That's fine. And subscription to match what was expected. So we will go to the subscribe and we'll say they added DT. Okay, now let's run the test. There you go. Okay. So we added some application structure. We added some domain components. We added some actual commands and handles and some unit tests around that. So feature, introduce, subscribe to planning item, introduce notifications system. Added subscribe to planning item. Butcher ability to track subscriptions. If a user doesn't want to subscribe to something anymore, there'll be a delete case. We'll go through all those things, and this is where I start to get into the point where now I'm starting to build this out, and I can start to. I should be able to sit there and actually plan out a bunch of stories because now it's a wish list. Now it starts to get to the point where having the tool would be what I want. Yeah. So there we go. So small commit note, add subscribe to planning items with both and subscriptions. Tests verify that a subscription can be added by the user and will not duplicate subscription. Okay, so commit that. Let's push to get it off the machine. We don't want the machine to have all the changes because if the machine gets lost, all that work's lost, right? And yeah. Morning, Napalm. Hope you are well. Yeah, sadly, I'd love to stream for longer today. I'm actually in a good place with the code, so we're starting to add notifications into the system. So starting to say, I care about this thing and be able to push things. So it'd be good to have a day of doing that. However, we cannot. So yeah, I mean, if anyone has any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, if you want to know more about what I'm doing, again, we're kind of building out this complicated system. Working now on this focus on this piece where we're going to create an API for the API for the client to be able to say, hey, here's my subscriptions. I've been wrestling with the idea of having a stream for doing all the Aspire side project stuff. Probably exposed to the world of fraud. I am though. Do it. Do it. We don't know everything. No one's perfect. You'll learn what you don't know by trying to describe what you do. And it will open your mind to new ideas and new concepts. And those that you will definitely get viewers. I know Mojo will definitely be there. I am fascinated by that stuff. So I will be there. Again, we all have areas we're interested in. So I would say do it. Just make sure before you try that you've got the hardware to support doing something of that you'll be able to stream and do the things, because that sort of stuff can run away, right? Okay, you've got plenty of power there. Yep. Yep. I actually bought a so I'm actually looking to see if there's anyone streaming app dev stuff that I know about. I actually bought a little Ryzen, bought a little what is it, 7940HS box with 64 gig of memory to do Kubernetes stuff with. So we're going to start doing that very soon. Once this is working, we're going to start doing that. Start building out a Kubernetes cluster and try and deploy the application. So we'll be looking at things like Pulumi and stuff. I think I'd like to understand more about code deployment. Okay. Well, you know what? I know I'm not doing a game stream, but I know that the people in here that are lurking are all general supporters of the community. So I'm going to raid you over to Fullbox. He's developing an awesome game and deserves to have some love. Yeah, I mean, if you have expertise in that sort of stuff, I definitely will. I will be doing some of that stuff in the upcoming months. because I do want to get this deployed and figured out, and starting to be able to allow people to test some of it as well. So there's a lot of challenges that I'll be facing in the upcoming month. Yeah, it's the last time I wanted to do something like that though, I basically stopped streaming for 3 months and just did it off stream because I got for the exact same reason I just told you to stream, right? But the problem was I had no idea about any of it. It was an absolute everything was a struggle. And it took me days to get a file to work properly. It took me hours to get it to actually do even the simplest little thing. Oh, yeah, I'll delete the link. You trying to link? What you trying to link to something specific? Ah, gotcha. If you whisper at me, it'll probably I can post it. I don't my yeah. Um and also I'll post it in my Discord as well if you give me that as well, and a few others because I actually mentioned this to Rambling Geek the other day. Um, he doesn't stream very often, but when he does stream a lot of tinkering and cool stuff like that. So, and he's very interested in that side of things. So, yeah. But anyway, yeah. Post the link in the Discord. There you go. Nice. Put that in chat. I think I'll start with Palumi. Oh, nice. I shall read this. Miss Ranhorn as well. Who I now have. Yeah, I'll give that a read over. Now lost my chance to shout out. Sian Hong. He does a lot of deployment stuff, and he's used Pulumi. So it's definitely something I'll be looking into. But anyway, that is me for now. I will be back tomorrow. I will see how far I can get on notifications this evening post stream so that we can kind of get to the point where tomorrow the idea will be to allow an API to say, hey, I care about this planning item. So again, the planning item's here. So the idea will be we'll have a toggle up here, click this, subscribe to this, and get told when things change in it. So there you go. Thank you all. Sally, yep, it was a good stream. We had a lot of conversation at the beginning, so the VOD might be interesting. And yeah, thank you all for joining me. We'll go raid Full Box. We're going to go see Mr. Box. He is building a game, and he's day by day, hopefully getting to the point where he's going to release it. It is on itch, so I would recommend playing it if you like puzzle games because it is quite fascinating. So take care all. Have a great day. Later.